Okay, chapter 12 of the book of Leviticus. There's some really interesting things we get to learn today about some bodily functions and other things, and some more about the purification rites and the rules that were going along with this. So some really interesting points we get to make today. So to start, of course, Lord reveals the law of purification for women after childbirth. So women were seen as unclean after giving birth, and therefore they had to wait a certain period of time to go through a process to be clean again, basically. So that we're going to learn more about this. Verse 1, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed and born a man child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. According to the days of the separation for her infirmity, she shall be unclean. And in the 8th day of the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. So this is the thing is, so when a woman gives birth, she is seen as unclean. And then for 8 days after that, she is unclean, basically. And then on day 8, the boy, his foreskin is circumcised. Go look in Genesis for our videos around circumcision. They talk a lot more about it back then when it was first instituted with Abraham. And you can learn a bit more about it there. And then verse 4, and she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. So she had to go 33 days. So 33 days, basically, she went with, she can't go into the tabernacle of congregation, can't touch the altars, can't touch the sacrifices, can't really do anything as far as the sacrifices and religious rites like they normally could. Now, you might look at this and go, why is that? Why were women have these extra rules on them? I really think, really, a lot of people look at this and go, well, that's because women are seen as not as important as men. They're suppressed as men. Here's a clear example of women being suppressed. You know, the men can do all these ordinances and do all this stuff all the time, but the women can't. I really think a big part of this is not so much saying that women can't perform ordinances or help with these things, but they are given time to heal. You got to realize that they don't have the modern medicine we have today. This is different. This is a challenging time for the life and health of a woman. She just gave birth. If it was a troubled or hard birth, it's going to be hard. She has to heal. She has to go through a process of taking care of herself. She's got this baby to take care of. Give her time to take care of her things. So they're not banned from these things, but given an excuse to say you are okay to not deal with these things for a period of time. So we want to look at this from more of a loving perspective, that God is considerate of the needs of his daughters in childbirth, basically. Now, of course, verse 5 gets a little controversial, and this is where a lot of people are going to have some issues with this. Verse 5, but if she bear a maid child, meaning a girl, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. So for 2 weeks, basically, nobody can talk with her, touch her, be around her, anything, which honestly, that sounds nice. You know, oh, I'm unclean. Guess what? No one can talk to me for 2 weeks. Sometimes that'd be kind of nice. You know, I just touched that carcass. You can't talk to me for the rest of the day. I could totally see people taking advantage of that. And then her purifying there as well. So this is an interesting point because it's a lot longer. What makes that difference versus giving birth to a boy child versus a girl child? And so here's something here's what comes out of the Old Testament study guide that the church does put out. So this is not, I would say, completely official teachings, but the Old Testament study guide, these are used in your institute classes. It is somewhat authorized. So here's what they had to say about this point here. It says, many things in the Mosaic law are puzzling at first, but become clear and understandable upon further investigation. This question, however, is one that seems to have no key at present for its correct interpretation. An obvious implication, quickly taken up by some modern critics, is that this rule is a reflection of the inferior status of women anciently, a status which they regard as supported by the law. This conclusion is fallacious for two reasons. First, elsewhere in the law and the Old Testament, there is evidence that women had high status and their rights were protected. In fact, women appear to have enjoyed considerably more freedom among the Jews than is now allowed them in Western Asia. That's from Fallows' book, Bible Encyclopedia, when you look up woman. This reference includes numerous scriptural references in support of this statement, in fact. See also Hastings' Dictionary of the Bible as well. Second, these laws were not the product of men's attitudes, but were direct revelation from the Lord. God does not view women as inferior in any way, although the roles of men and women are different. Speculation on why the Lord revealed different requirements for ceremonial purifying after the birth of male and female children is pointless until further revelation is received on the matter. So we don't really know why. There's not an explanation here as to why you had to wait longer to be purified after having a daughter. In a way, I think that was kind of, if you think about it, nobody else can talk with you or deal with you, or you were free to not have to go, do the normal ritual stuff. You were excused from having to do these daily routines for longer. So in a way, it almost looks like, really, if you had a daughter, you were in a way better off because you had more time to just take care of you and your daughter and not worry about the rest of life, basically, and these other things. So you're given more time off, basically, if you had a daughter. So in a way, that's probably a better situation than if you had a son. But it's important to look at this in the grander context of all the gospel, okay, and understand that God does love his daughters. And there's a huge argument. If you understand temple ceremonies and the differences between the temple ceremonies for men and women, and yes, there are differences, then you understand that while some of the laws are differently applied between men and women, it's pretty apparent that God favors his daughters and he gives them extra benefits, which is, I think, totally appropriate, completely appropriate to do. So, right, verse 6, when the days of her purifying are fulfilled for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation unto the priest, who shall offer it before the Lord and make an atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood. This is a law for her that hath borne a male or a female. If she be not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtles or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be clean. So there's an opportunity to be clean. And what they're really meaning here is to be clean is to be allowed to deal in sacred ordinances, not the other way around, basically. In fact, I have a quote for that to talk about this more, what that means to be clean. So let me read that, in fact, and we can discuss this a little bit. Why should natural bodily functions render one unclean? First, unclean in the Mosaic sense did not suggest something disgusting or filthy, nor did it imply that the body or the natural functions of the body, such as childbirth or sexual relations, were inherently evil. This is a quote from Clark in his book Bible Commentary. The term unclean in this and the following cases is generally understood in a mere legal sense, the rendering a person unfit for sacred ordinances. Now, this point is very important to understanding the Lord's revelations on these matters. The ordinances of the Mosaic law were all designed to symbolize spiritual truths. The more nearly one approached perfection in the performance of the law, the more closely one approached the true symbolic meaning of the ordinance. The physical body and its natural functions remind one that he is of the earth and of the physical. Therefore, to say that a man or woman was unclean, that is, not to perform sacred ordinances, at certain times was to suggest to the mind that the natural man must be put aside in order to approach God. So clean and unclean doesn't mean you're dirty, you're filthy, you're bad, you're evil, anything like that. It means you're not prepared to perform sacred ordinances, basically. That's the difference. So that clean allows them to perform those ordinances and to do those things. So that's what it means basically. So and women have other situations where men don't, that we have to account for that. So that's what this chapter is about, is dealing with some of those other situations. Now, something was interesting in Alexander and Alexander's book, Erdman's Handbook to the Bible. They had an interesting quote here. It says, in Canaan, prostitution and fertility rites were all mixed up with worship. So this is important. In the land of Canaan, the Canaanites and the other groups that were there, okay, that's this chosen land that they're going to, that God gave to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that the children of Israel now are going there to do. In their rites, and this is so common, that the ideas of sex and sexuality become intertwined with worship. And we see this a lot in movies and other things, and it's the same challenge that the Canaanites had. So in Israel, by sharp contrast, anything suggesting the sexual or sensual is strictly banned from the worship of God. The intention is not to write off this side of life as dirty, as is plain elsewhere in Scripture. The purpose is to ensure its separation from the worship of God. The rule of strict cleanliness in all sexual matters was also a positive safeguard to health. So they're delineating out certain things are allowed, but when we do things that are more holy, like go to church, like do church functions, we should not be thinking about carnal perspectives or ideas. Okay, that is where we learn to see each other differently. And so that's important. When we are set aside as peculiar people being holy, we shouldn't think about each other in ways that would be more debasing or more worldly, but think more holy of each other. So that's important, a very important point to point out from this chapter as how this can really apply to our life. That the world wants us to believe that sex is kind of everything. It's kind of the main point of everything that goes on. That's why they joke about it. That's why movies are always made about it. There's always some kind of intimacy scenes in movies these days, no matter what kind of genre it is, because they see it as like the main crown feature. But if you think about it, it's really about worldliness, being more worldly, whereas we want to be more holy and more set aside. And so we need to overcome those natural man tendencies and think more holy. Doesn't mean it's bad to do those things given the proper context and rules that God has given us. But it's important for us to realize that it is only for a certain narrow, limited view that we experience those things in, and then we focus on other things, more holy things, more think of a higher way to think of each other in the rest of what we do. Basically, it's very, very important. So something to think about, good ideas, reminders to watch your thoughts, watch what you think, and how that can help us to make sure that we can improve our holiness as well. So thanks for watching. We appreciate that, and we'll see you in the next chapter.